Alright, so this is part 2 of kind of playing around with thinning down and applying different paint applications on your palette. So I'm going to be continuing to work from this still life right here, okay? So oil paint, someone described it as kind of like mud, and so you can thin it down and just keep it thick as is as well, kind of very pasty. You can even thicken it up even more, or make it fattier by adding linseed oil rather than water or paint thinner to thin it down. So there are different things you can do, and one thing that is important is not to be scared of oil paint, right? Don't let it control you. Make sure you control it, okay? So let's see what we can do. So I have some paint, and then I'll be working from this image, like I said, and then just a couple things. So you should have like a few different kinds of brushes, right? Some bigger ones, even bigger would be kind of cool, some thinner ones, okay? And I have some paint. So let's start with kind of very thin. So I'm going to thin down some black paint, some gray paint a lot. So very, very watery and thin. Just be careful. I'm going to try not to like get it too runny. So very runny. So some painters love just like paint running down their canvas. I don't know if you've seen any artist videos. Like I would recommend that you watch like the Art21, the PBS Art21 art video interviews. Some of them show like painters working in like their studio practice, and it just kind of helps you get a glimpse of how different artists work, because sometimes you're just stuck in your own world and you don't know the techniques, or I don't go over them with you. So yeah, so one thing, let's just try this out. So I added some very thin paint, okay, and let's see if we can make it very runny. Just let it like run down the canvas. Okay, so it's just gonna bleed into the canvas like this, right? Ooh, lots of fun. Okay, and this is kind of good for like to give your very white canvas some sort of middle value, neutral, like darker value, so that if you want to like pull out the lights, or like you would with charcoal, like some of you students have mentioned that you like to put some sort of value first when you work with charcoal. Same thing with painting, and it's very thin and very wet. I slide my hand on it and it's very it's a mess. Well, you can't really see the gray paint. Yeah, it's like finger painting, right? If I were to wipe this with my rag, right, and kind of like dry it up, it's still not like completely blank, but there's still a light volume on it. Let's say I want it a little bit darker. We can make it like less thinned out. So let's see if I can use the liquid that I have. Sorry, I can't really and if you have a bigger brush, that'd be awesome. I'm just using the brush I have. A large surface, why use a small brush? Let's see, there's a streak of white. I didn't mix it in all the way consistently. Alright, so let's just go in there, get some paint on the canvas. This is kind of odd with oil paint, like real oil paints. The feeling is a little different. The water one, it doesn't feel as slimy and oily. Which I guess is kind of weird, because I kind of like that about oil paints. It's just like I want to get. It doesn't really stick to the canvas as well. There's like this weird repelly kind of feeling. Maybe because I didn't prime this canvas. Alright, so I have something like this, and if I like go in at it with a brush, you know, I can draw a few things with like a darker line. Like let's say I want to draw, you can like draw directly like this, you know, drawing my cone and cube, right? Or what I like to do is I like to kind of dry it out first and kind of rub the pigment into the canvas and dry it up so that it's a little bit easier to work with. I used to do this so much, like with different colors. I would use like neon pink or like blue. Some artists love to just paint a layer of a color first and then draw on it. So there's an artist who does red, because the red kind of shows through. It's like you're drawing a portrait and kind of makes the colors more vibrant, and the colors will show through. But usually a lot of artists use this method. It's called an underpainting method, where, let's see. So there's different ways to go about this. Let's say I'm going to draw a quick still life. Let's just draw the cone. I'm going to use my black, mix it in a dark kind of gray. Oops, it's still runny. And then you don't have to draw with a pencil. Here you can draw with a pencil, charcoal, color pencil, pastel. You can draw with your brush. Okay, so let's see if I can draw a cone. I bet you guys are all sick of these objects. And the nice thing about kind of drawing with this is that if you mess up, you can just wipe it off. The lines will show, but all you have to do is you could dip your rag in pigment, I mean not pigment, paint thinner or water, and then just wipe it off, wipe the whole thing off. And it will lighten up your surface, but you can just go back in and darken it again. Same process. So I'm just going to leave it as is. The thing about oil paints is that you want to work in layers. And so it's always good to start thin to thick, because there's kind of like a whole chemistry behind oil paints and such, but very, very simplified. You want to add the thinner layers of paint for the first layers, like the first and the bottom thin layer, and then gradually as you add more paint on top with the layers, you want to get thicker, meaning fatter or oilier. So for the first layers, usually artists won't add like linseed oil or poppy seed oil or oil medium, because what the oil does is it dries a lot slower, and also because it is oil, it is not stagnant, it is moving. So if you put a layer of very thick linseed oil mixed, very fatty, like you mix linseed oil and then add a thick layer on the bottom layer, and then add a layer of paint that's just thinned down with water, the top layer will crack. That's why you don't add acrylic paint on top of oil paint. You add the acrylic paint first, and then the oil paint, because the oil will move over time and crack the layer on top. So whatever layer is on top, you want it to be the thickest, the most fattiest, the most moving, okay? But that was very important way back then, especially. These days it's a lot more stable oil paints, and but still no, you want to work thin to thick. So a lot of painters will use acrylic paint because for the first few layers, like the underpainting, or like to get the colors down first, because it dries quicker, and then they can go over it with oil because it dries so slowly. I hope that made sense. Right. So let's say let's say, so I'm drawing this right here, and like this side, this part of the cone right here is light, right? We got this kind of mid value. You don't have to go at, you can just paint white on top, but you can also pull the value out. There's a few ways. You can grab a damp brush and then just, this one, it doesn't really make a difference, but let's see what this does. And then you can go ahead with a dry part of the rag and then pull out the light part. See, it doesn't make too much of a difference, but it does pull it out some. So you can see that a little bit, that light part on the cone, a little bit of light part comes out of here. And then you can darken the darker part of the cone. And lighten the light part of the cone. Alright, let's say you messed up, right? That looks pretty terrible. Let's say you messed up or you're just like, you're not feeling it. There are days when I go in and start a painting and I spend a good day on it, like 3, 4, 5 hours, and I just hate the whole painting. Wouldn't recommend you to like throw the painting away or like erase everything, but, or just like leave it. Well, but let's say you just can't help it. You want to erase the whole thing. You can just, or you mess up just like a part. So you want to start the cone over and like all the paint is wet. So like you try to put more paint, but the colors are just getting muddy and smudging. Go ahead and just wipe the paint off, right? Once again, don't let the paint control you. Control the paint, right? Wipe it off as best as you can. Let it dry. Redraw the lines. And just start over, okay? So that's what I would recommend. So remember, first few layers work thin. You can kind of put a layer of thin paint below. Play around with the thickness and thinness of the paints.